Welcome to the class, everybody. Dr. O here. Today, I'm going to talk about government policy, government economic policy we're talking about. We can categorize two of government economic policy. First one is price control, and next one is taxes. So government imposes tax to the buyer or seller. Or price control, in general, government is setting up the price. So minimum price and maximum price generally try to help economic agent or citizens in the government perspective. Whatever purpose it is, try to help the people or citizens daily life. So price control can be government setting up the minimum price. So in the market, you should not charge more than certain price. Or the other side, maximum price. So maximum price can be you cannot charge, over a certain price. So you should charge less than given price limit. So upper limit, lower limit is determined by government as economic policy. That is a price control. And the other side is tax. Government imposes a tax. And in general, government is not profit, pursuing agent. So they cannot earn by business. They don't have money to earn by the, public service. Public service in general, free. So they don't have any sources to, the money they need to providing the service. In that perspective, tax itself is really good source of income, government income, to providing their service for free to the citizen. So it is a really important tax policy, but tax itself have strong impact to the market. So it depending on government philosophy, some government, insists that they want to stay in the small government, which is laissez-faire. Like we don't want to touch private market actions. So deregulation is their direction to making a policy or running an economy in that country. So on the other side, we need to have a lot of help to the poor or the low-income family. So they do a lot of public services. Then they need more money. So welfare, general welfare, can be increased by as time goes by. So government itself will try to help the people with the money. So the social welfare or the government action or government service, public service is increasing by that. All those different type of services. So public service is increasing. They need more financial. Public finance is necessary. More collecting a tax and paying or transfer or giving out some service out of it. So which one is which? It's depending on the philosophy, right-wing side, left-wing side, and certain time period in the history. The neoliberalism is coming and we need to stay back to small government. It depending on citizens' vote and their decision, but depending on the politics, which side of the party got the authority to running a government, then it changes a lot. So recently, British also have those kind of issues, like moving to the neoliberalism side of economic policy they want to pursue, but there is a lot of resistance coming from the citizens and nowadays situation in the worldwide. So all the economists criticize about it. So but the direction of that British movement is deregulations, like government actions or regulate a certain economic activity, reducing down that is deregulation, and tax cut. so tax amount is going down. But nowadays, inflation is matters. Small government and tax cuts and deregulation. By doing so, we want to focus on the economic growth, and the private market goes well in that directions. But in that kind of thing, boosting the economy in that directions, and inflation cannot be dealt properly with it. So majority of economists criticize with it. So on those big lines, there is a lot of government action going on. Because of the government actions, market itself is, interfering of their work. So we need to be careful about to do that. Before that, looking at the real life, we want to analyze what kind of government policy, economic policy exists. And today I am introducing two big categories of it, which one is price control, and second one is a tax. So one by one, what type of thing is exist and how we can expect under that kind of policies on in general situation. Ready, everybody? Let's get into it. So first thing what you're going to look at is price control. Price control, two sides: price ceiling, price flooring. Price flooring means bottom part, the floor, right? We're setting up the lower bound of a price government is setting up. And in other side, price ceiling. Ceiling is the top of a room, that is a ceiling, right? So the upper bound of price government imposed. There is one thing we need to note. Once suddenly the price changes out of equilibrium point, what will happen? If the price is higher than equilibrium point, then excessive supply is happening, right? So surplus, it is called. Then supplier or seller try to sell more because they can earn higher price with the certain product they produce, and they want to make revenue higher. By doing so, profit can be maximized. In other cases, price increases, demand side, quantity demanded goes down, so people don't want to buy that higher price. Then what will happen? Supply side, producer cannot sell their product with the price. So government is setting up the upper bound of it. So in this market, they cannot charge less than that price that is necessary for that. So price ceiling, sometimes price ceiling is setting up the lower than market equilibrium price. Naturally, the price will go up automatically to the equilibrium point because the shortage happen. There is a lot of buyer want to buy at the price, but there is no product or services exist in the market. So the demand side demand or find out some producer and saying that, oh, I want to pay more. I'm willing to pay more. Provide me first. So that is a shortage situation. There is a lot of buyer want to buy, but there is not that many product out there. Then they going out to find out the seller and asking, providing first to them with the higher price. In general, tendency like that makes market price goes up to equilibrium price. So price control is, government also know about these issues. So we can analyze under this situation, even though in general, price control is setting up two big categories like a price ceiling and price flooring. When government think that, oh, this kind of situation, for example, in real life, public residential service. So the low income family cannot find decent residence, so house, home, so they don't have that much money. Then government to try to help them, and then making a public residence, they build up and provide with the lower price. Then what will happen? Shortage. right? Price is lower than market price. So there is not private producer want to supply that amount. Even though government try to giving out the service by themselves, but always fund is lacking, so it has a trouble. So shortage issue is there. Then shortage issue is right there. What kind of phenomenon we can observe in general? In general, I also observed when I was in US and tried to get in the residential service when I in the PhD program. I was like, PhD student, so don't have that much income. And also my income level can be qualified with the public residential service. And go to the public office and signing up. But I need to wait at least 2 years. There is a lot of people or family ahead of me and sign up that, list and then waiting for that spot is empty. So that kind of shortage is necessary. Why is that happening? The rent of that public residential is lower than market price. So shortage happen. So there is a small space or small number of housing relative to qualified demand or the buyer side or the somebody or the family need a residential service is way higher than that. Then that kind of who is really necessary that service, somebody we can allocate. Allocation problem always happen. So that kind of issue of price control is exists. And another side is like this: minimum wage. Minimum wage is a huge argument between economists and also politics. Politicians also argue about it. But general tendency is like that. Based on the market theory, we can tell this. We can come up with surplus. Well, in this case, we need to understand the labor market. Labor market in cases in general, we think that we are buyer side, like we always purchasing the goods and services. So it is really easy to setting up as a consumer side. We, are very comfortable with. But the labor market perspective, individual, economic agent going out to selling my labor. So I'm the supplier. With the high price, if minimum price is higher than regular market equilibrium price, then there is a lot of people want to work at that place. But what will happen is supply is higher than demand. Firm doesn't want to have higher that much labor in higher price. In that cases, excessive supply happens. Surplus? Surplus in labor market. So somebody want to get a job but cannot find a job. So unemployment issue at that point is happening all the time, theoretically. So there is a lot of economic research on if there is that kind of situation is on, what will happen, is that really, matters, like the benefit of giving out general level of income guaranteed by the minimum wage is better. Each one of the family who has a low wage in general, they try to participate in the market. So the supporting the minimum wage side is always telling us that minimum wage help low income family first, and also reducing a crime rate a lot. Somebody who want to get a job with a decent price and managing their life regularly, but cannot do it because of that, decent amount of wage can guarantee their life is going right directions. So that kind of benefit exists. But in general, supply and demand analysis, we can tell that, in that cases, surplus happen, excessive supply, and we cannot avoid unemployment issue. With that higher wage, lots of people work at that, position, but the firm doesn't want to hire that much. So excessive supply happens. So that kind of real life example exists in the price control. And always we can think of it, right? This one doesn't move in supply and demand. Private market equilibrium point is right there, but government directly control the price out of it. So setting up the price, minimum wage is setting up higher than equilibrium price. Minimum wage, if minimum wage is setting up lower than equilibrium price, what will happen? Automatically, the wage is going up to equilibrium price. And that doesn't help to somebody who really want to guarantee about certain amount of wage. Yeah, that people already hired who can get a job. So that doesn't help with the low income family. So it is, in other words, technically we're calling that not binding contract or not binding policy. So minimum wage should be higher than equilibrium wage. And in other case, public residential service. In that cases, yeah, the price rent should be lower than equilibrium price. Let's see one by one as a graph. First one, what we are going to see is a price ceiling. Price ceiling is, higher price. Upper bound is determined by government. So price ceiling should be lower than equilibrium price. By doing so, that policy is binding. So in other words, that price ceiling is meaningful. Other than that, price ceiling is higher than equilibrium price. Upper bound is determined by the government, is higher than equilibrium price. It doesn't matter. It will, returning to equilibrium price automatically. So boundary, government cannot say that you cannot charge more than that, right? The ceiling, the upper bound, upper limit is determined. If upper limit is higher than equilibrium price, yeah, everybody can charge less than that. Then, even though the registration is already, happened, but it doesn't effective to control or interfere the market equilibrium point. So again, the price ceiling should be lower than equilibrium price. And next, what is the matter? Shortage happen. As you can see the graph, right? Price is lower than equilibrium price. Price ceiling is setting up. Then automatically shortage happen. Excessive demand. There is a lot of people who want to getting that residential service in realistic as example, but there is not that many services supplied. So next one, what will happen? Yeah, there is a lot of line to wait until they actually getting the service. So yeah, one thing is government to try to build a more public residential, service, the apartment or the buildings or house they need to build, but it takes time and making a supply and demand control and estimate in the future how many spot is necessary. But it is really hard to coordinate all those information in the future, especially. And that is usually, in historically not that successful so far. So that is another issue, right? Next one, we are thinking about price flooring. So lower bound of it, good example is minimum wage. As you can see, the binding, price flooring is the price setting up by the government should be higher than equilibrium price. By doing so, we can observe the labor surplus. The supply is higher than demand. Individual firm doesn't want to hire at that higher wage because they cannot come up with it. They are only moving forward the profit. But in general, under that cases, they cannot manage that. So their demand is small. The quantity demand is smaller than obviously supply. So we come up with what? Unemployment. Somebody who want to get a job but cannot get it. So under this situation, we are arguing or discussing about, is that really helpful to the poor or low-income family? So fundamentally, some part of it, who really get a job at that small amount of demand, right? Somebody who actually get a job at that time or at that price. But the amount itself of unemployment can be varied depending on the shape of demand and supply curve. We will discuss about this issue with the concept we already learned about it as elasticity. Elasticity showing the shape of demand and the supply curve. If it is elastic, yeah, it is perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic cases we can see, right? Shape is flatter, shape is steeper. So that's a general tendency. So under that kind of argument, what will happen as a policy suggestion we can think of? Close to the equilibrium point, the shape of demand and supply looks like it, and then correspondingly, what is the better idea? Does we really need minimum wage at this point? So it is really hard philosophically, or based on the economic model. In general, we can say theory, right? Minimum wage help the somebody who wage is very low. So eventually, minimum wage try to help low-income family, but a lot of them, because of that, cannot get a job. Even less than the equilibrium, or the amount they can get a job is smaller than equilibrium point. So equilibrium quantity itself and relative to price, quantity demanded is reducing. And you can see as a graph the amount of the gap between the price at the price level, the gap between the demand, quantity demanded and quantity supplied, which I marked as labor surplus. That amount is unemployment. Somebody who want to get a job at the price or at that wage cannot get a job. So that kind of issue is always happening in price flooring. So especially you can see in the argument about minimum wage. So how much percentage should be increased? And that is, again, political issue always happening. We need to come back to Congress agree with a certain percentage, and by doing so, legally, you can moving forward about it. So as we remember, the minimum wage is try to help somebody who has a lower wage, but once the minimum wage is in action, then they might lose their job, or they cannot find a job at that higher wage. So legally, government control directly, you cannot pay the worker less than this price or this wage. So that's a legal issue. So firm cannot pay less than that. That's under the certain situation, that is a binding, which minimum wage is higher than equilibrium wage. Then unemployment. We cannot avoid with it. But the power of unemployment, or the magnitude of unemployment, is lower relative to higher wage than somebody who get a job luckily and live their monthly payment and manage their life easily, more comfortably. So that's the government original issue or original point they want to achieve, but side effect, unemployment. So in addition, in general, price control we can think of is price are good signal. So why do we think about market is better? And the point of neoclassical or laissez-faire advocated market mechanism. So in old days, we announced that communism or the control economy is done. Historically, we observed that. And the reason why we think of it is that is really complicated life exists right here, right now. So somebody or some system or other system cannot deal with it if there is God ability, somebody who has ability to look at the forward and finding out their, information thoroughly. Nowadays, information or, data, big data era, so we can easily collect more information out of it. But still, real life is so complicated. So somebody who cannot easily plan out all the market actions. So yeah, even we don't recall Adam Smith's idea, the butchers or the bakers is not altruistic to feed us for having a goodwill to doing their work. No, it isn't. They're just following their interest. They want to get a more, income. They work hard to make a profit out of it. So everybody following their interest and their will, and by the free trade, free will can make the most efficient solution in the system as a market. So he's calling the invisible hand in the market can solve all the problem. I just mentioned the 3 problems every economy has: what kind of product and services we should produce, how we can produce, and how we can distribute it can be solved at once as we observed market equilibrium. So that is a market mechanism, and mainstream economists always think of and advocated, and we observed in real life, communists are doing that controlled economy, and that control itself ruined the incentive to work hard, and the economy itself and economic growth is slowing down. All the outcomes are not efficient. So historically, we observed that market system is better, and democracy as a political system and economic system as a market system. Even though market system goes on, we come up with inequality issue. Somebody who is rich and getting richer and richer, and somebody who poor, cannot make up or turn over the socio-economic status. The gap between the rich family and the poor family, high income and low income, widened and widened. So that kind of thing is not solvable using original, or so far we researched and think about thoroughly, but in mainstream economics doesn't have good solution. So it's been so while, but we observing in market system, and somebody who born in the high income family can make better jobs and better income, better education, and they bequested wealth continuously, and the gap between them or inequality issue cannot be solvable. So that is a big issue, but still, so far, as we observe, the fundamental problem is control economy cannot boosting every individual incentive to work hard. That is a big issue, and because of that, we declared that market system is better in economic perspective. So under that, price control is a little bit more, toward to control relative to laissez-faire, free market advocate idea or philosophy. But still, we need some kind of movement from that, where we need to stand. Even though we believe that market system is better than others so far, human being invented, but still has issue, we need to try to solve it. One way or two, we as a realistic observation, price control, right? Minimum wage is that, and public residential services in other cases. Opposite, the case of price control, one is price of flooring, one is the price ceiling out of it. So those direct control, direct price control from the government economic policy, we going over as the two cases. Now we are going to think about the tax. So tax is, as I introduced, is number one important income source of government. Government also need source, finance to doing their work, providing public services and also all the political controls to help the citizens. So government perspective is, we will see about sooner or later. Welfare maximizing is a government point, as economists think of. So we easily think of that each individual consumer, each individual try to make their life happier. So in other words, economists point of view, we are saying each individual consumer try to maximizing their happiness. In other words, utility maximizing agent. Opposite side, the producer, firm itself try to maximize their profit. We learned about the total revenue before, and total revenue minus total cost itself can be measured as profit, and they want to make money out of running business. So in two action, private sector, buyer and seller or consumer and producer working like that way, meet at the market, transacted on their own free will, and then we can get the most efficient outcome coming out as the equilibrium. And market action and market system itself is delivering that equilibrium point the most efficient, and that market is working or price is fluctuating or changing frequently to returning to the equilibrium, then we can come up with the best solution of a society. Government action is not necessary, but in all days and in history, we're observing that some byproduct is coming out. Inequality issue is the number one in the systems. So government purpose of looking at the market is if there is something happened in the market. Sometimes, theory says government doesn't touch it, and as market goes as efficiently, but there is lots of underlying assumptions and situation is necessary. But in reality, we cannot observe that. Then what do we need to do? Government intervene the market, try to solve some issues. So the government have economic tools to intervene the market is number one, price control, number two, tax. So it's a micro level of analysis, price control and tax. But in other action, even though it is independent, but monetary policy is a another thing, and fiscal policy as a one thing to additionally we can think of. So it is giving out some money to building up the public services, not like a directly to intervene the market. But under the microeconomic perspective, we are looking at the market as the tools, as an area or universe we are looking at. So in general, aggregate level, government can putting out some big project to sending out. That is a fiscal policy in the bigger perspective, and also monetary policy, central bank doing a monetary policy out of it. That is government intervention in the macro level of perspective. But in the micro level, we are looking at the policy, government policy toward to the market. So we see price control or tax as government policy. So we're going over price control already, and now we are looking at the tax perspective. Yeah, as I mentioned, the tax is the number one source of income to government. In macro level, same thing. So tax is another way to control the boosting or cooling down of economy. Like at this point, governments are also doing the cooling down because of inflation issues coming out, right? So yeah, behind that macro part of it, we are looking at the tax. What tax impact to the real market? So yeah, goods and services market, what will happen if tax is imposed? That is what we are going to see today. So let's say we are going to looking at the more realistic examples. So government to try to impose a tax, $1.50. Whatever the outcome or the product it is, government to think that we need each one of unit $1.50 is imposed as a tax. So what will happen if we try to impose a tax to the buyer? What will happen? We try to tax to the seller. Is the same outcome? How? And what is the result out of that tax policy? That's what you're going to see. First, let's see. What you're going to see is as a graph, we are looking at the tax on toward to the buyer. So each one of buying a good or try to consume or demand a good, then you need to pay $1.50 to the government. Let's say that. Then what will happen? So demand curve. In a consumer perspective, let's think about that. Government deprive your $1.50 all the time you buy one more product you try to consume. Then demand, in the consumer point of view, price is going up by $1.50. So demand should shift to the left. Demand decrease. Demand decreases. So price is increasing, but the price itself is not. It is happened by the government imposed tax. So outside effect, instead of actual prices going up in market. So demand curve itself shift to the left. But this time we need to think about how big or how much it is. We will assume that demand curve is linear as a simple analysis. And demand curve shift to the left, we agree with it. Demand decreases. And then how much? The level of each one of unit is 1.50, 1.50, $1.50. So the distance of vertical distance of original demand to the new demand is $1.50. So the amount of $1.50 demand curve shift to the left. So vertical difference is $1.50 because government deprive $1.50. So actually your demand is right there. Private demand is right there. But after tax demand is $1.50 vertically moving down in that cases. So as you can see the graph, that is the impact out of it. Supply curve, demand curve, privately stay same, but it is moving $1.50. So it is one example of it. So I can see that if the tax amount, that green line, vertical line is $1.50, and you draw each one of the point, and then vertical distance is $1.50. So parallelly moving, the slope doesn't change. The demand curve itself is $1.50 as the p-intercept goes down about $1.50. Yeah, like that. So under the case, the distance from the the tax amount to $1.50, the green line itself is vertically $1.50, and the change once demand curve is down there, new equilibrium point is happening. In this case, 500 was the equilibrium quantity before tax. Now after tax imposed, 450 is a new equilibrium point. At that point, what is the consequence out of it, right? So D1 is moved to the D2, and a new point is observed. At that time, 950, that is supplier, like a producer can getting out of selling their product. Why? Supply side, the producer side doesn't impact by the tax imposition. So that price originally they have in mind the supply schedule. They want to charge 950, so they will have 950 out of it. But each one of the consumer should pay 950 plus $1.50. So the consequence or the price they need to pay is $11. So demand curve should shift. So at that point, new equilibrium is determined. But actual payment, $9.50 to the producer and $1.50 to the government. So actual payment of each consumer is $11. That will show the higher point is $11 is actual demand side of payment. PD it should be, right? Or that is PB, P price of buyer, and PS price of seller is 950. It's marked like that. Original equilibrium point is $10 and 500 as quantity. Now equilibrium point is 950 and 450 as a private side, and government deprived $1.50 out of it. So that is shown like that. Okay. So once tax is imposed, the movement is like that. So first thing we saw is if government imposes a tax on the buyer side, what will happen in the market? Next, let's move on to the government impose a tax to the supplier side. Then supply curve shift to the left. Supply decreases because of government tax policy. It is negatively impact on the producer. And also, in other way, we can think of this. Supply curve is showing the information of cost of a producer. In general, we will look at the producer theory. We will realize that easily, and then we can prove it. Supply curve is nothing but marginal cost for the firm. Anyway, so S1 is linear again, and supply curve shift to the left. But how much, what kind of magnitude? As you can imagine, the vertical distance is $1.50. Each one of a unit, government to charge $1.50 out of it. So the distance itself is $1.50 to S1 to the S2. The vertical difference is $1.50. So shift to the left, but the vertical difference is $1.50. So as we can see, original equilibrium point is $10 and the 500 as equilibrium point as a quantity. But the price can be increased until to the $11. As you can see, the tax amount is $1.50 as a green line again right here. And then quantity is reduced by the 550. So the example itself is we're showing the exact same impact of equilibrium change, quantity reduced by the 50, price is increased by $1.50, the $1, even though price, the tax amount is $1.50, but equilibrium price, new equilibrium price, or they need to pay $11 maximum. So in this case, tax is imposed on the supply side, right? And let's look at that. Supply curve shift to the left, but the vertical distances are like that. And as we can observe that, new equilibrium point is 550 and the price is $11. So they can get, each firm will charge $11 of product. So they will earn $11 directly from the demand, like a consumer or buyer. So buyer will pay to the seller or producer $11. So they get the $11, but they need to pay $1.50 to the government, each one of the unit. Total tax unit doesn't matter at this point, just equilibrium point we analyze it. So the green line $1.50 they need to pay. So the price of seller is $11. $11 minus $1.50, so $9.50, and the buyer actually paying $11. It's the same, right? So PV and PS is exactly the same as a previous graph, as you can remember. So the firm, each firm will charge $11 of a product. So they will originally receiving the $11. That means that buyer need to pay $11, even though they are not, government are not imposed to the tax on the buyer, only impose a tax to the seller, but the price they need to pay as a buyer is $11 the same. And then they collect $11 as a supply side, and then they pay to the government $1.50. Then it's the same thing as seller side of price. They earn $9.50 per unit. So even though government imposes tax on the buyer, impose tax to the seller, it's exactly the same impact. Either way, they can do it. But usually in reality, government try to tax on the seller side because it's easier to collect the tax relatively. So nowadays, a payment issue like paying a credit card and the method of collecting a tax is easier. But in old days, the collecting cost perspective, the imposed tax into the seller is easier. So that's customs and culture, all those things is a relating issue with that. So especially in Korea, we don't have any sales tax. Directly, consumer doesn't pay the tax. But in the middle of that, the price, final price itself is inclusive of tax. They setting up the price correspondingly. So you are paying the tax buying product. So yeah, in US, sales tax is always there. So even though list price is $8, 8% or 0.2%, 0.3%, whatever it depending on the items or categories of items, it varies. But on top of that, you see the price on it. That is not the price you need to pay. Sales tax is collecting by the consumer directly. So it depending on the culture, but we didn't see much of it. We only Korean government charging the value-added tax, right, VAT, relative to U.S. sales tax. Other taxes all exist, like income tax and similar regime to each one of the countries. There is not that big differences as long as market system is going, but there is a specific method to collecting tax as a culture or customs. Today we discussing about the government economic policy in microeconomics perspective. We can separate or differentiate two big categories. One, price control, and another one is tax. So price control as an example of price floor, price ceiling, and setting up the lower upper limit of price. Directly government is setting up the price. It is not looking at the market system itself, directly involving intervene the market. Relatively, tax is a little bit less control. By doing so, there is giving the more bumper to private sector moving. So in general, economists prefer to using the tax instead of price control, or sometimes quantity control in international trade. Quota is a quantity control of the market directly, and tax is the same thing as a tariff in import and export cases. So there is a lot of other cases if you broaden your idea or visions, but in general, we can think of direct price control is one policy government can be in action in the market intervention. And also another side is a tax. So one thing we learned today is even though tax is imposed on the buyer side or seller side, the consumer or firm, doesn't matter. The impact itself eventually to the market is similar. It can be changes a little bit difference, giving out differences when the elasticity or the shape of demand and supply is a little bit different. The impact of economic policy is different, and our approach should be looking at the elasticity. In the perspective, what we learned before, elasticity is a really important information government needs to know before doing economic policy. And by doing so, as doing our regular life, we can think of it, oh, this is the logic why government moving this direction instead of others. So one by one, other specific in detail example we're going to see next time. And another thing we need to go over is tax incidence. What kind of burden? Once tax is imposed, there is some impact on the buyer and seller side, and how much of it, and who will hurt more relative to one side or another. So tax is imposed, both side will have burden. Like what you can see is even though tax is imposed on the buyer, imposed the seller, the impact or the $1.50 can be impact on the both side. Buyer side, need to pay additionally. Seller side need to pay $1.50, but the price and the gap, the difference between original equilibrium point to the left. So what will happen to each one of the sector, is side impact by imposing tax by the government will be discussed next time. Thanks for listening to the lecture. Have a good one and see you soon.